Okay, we'll go ahead to honor everyone's time. We will get started and call this meeting to order. Just a reminder that, that our meetings are recorded, and so know that we're being recorded. Jennifer always reminds me in big letters, I think, to help me watch my tongue. So we will begin with a roll call. Jennifer, if you'll call the roll.
Paula Addis. Present. Tara Devon. Present. Jessica Eade. As absent. Greg Guy.
Here.
Amy Hart.
Here.
Sharon Hildebrandt.
Here.
Ernest Kincaid.
Here.
Earl Peterson.
Yep.
Deborah Arenio.
Here.
Faith Seymour.
Here.
Kristen Sinclair.
Here.
Christina, sorry. Heather Stewart is absent. Toya Sanderson is excused. Melanie Hadaway is here.
So we will just go around, if you guys don't mind, and we can take a moment just to introduce ourselves. We have a couple of new members who are joining us. Toya Sanderson is our new school board member who's been assigned to our committee. It was Mr. Doran, and when they reorganized here after the election, so she had to be out this evening. So she will be joining us at our next meeting. So I'm Melanie Hadaway. I am the Director of Teaching and Learning here in the district, and I am glad to see you all here. Mr. Kincaid, you want to start us off with an introduction of who you are?
Mr. Kincaid. And I'm from Allison, so been here 3 years. 3 years, yeah. 3 years, so still having fun. So, hey, you up, right?
Earl Peterson, Capricorn. No walk on the beach. Been here since 2010. I work in the court system. I have 4 kids in the district. A wife in the district. Thankfully not a student. But that's funny. Can I think of anything else?
If you think of it, you can tell us in the comments.
You know I will.
I know you will.
Hi, I'm Deborah Arenio. I used to work for the school district as a librarian. I now teach for the university and also online for Montana State University.
Welcome, brand new member.
And I'm new.
Yes.
Excited.
First meeting.
My name is Faith Seymour. I'm really excited to be on this committee. I love this committee. I'm not in the education system. I'm from GCI. Worked there for decades and decades and decades. And I come from a kind of tech background, and I'm really excited about STEM and world languages.
My name is Christina Sinclair. I'm a new mother that was moving.
Who has grown since our last meeting?
Yes,
Yeah.
4 months now.
Wow.
I live out in the North Pole area. I have a background in psychology and early childhood education. And I'm excited to be here.
I'm Sharon Hildebrandt. I am a parent, as it says. I have 2 young ones in the school district. Professionally, I represent my regional corporation at different tribal, federal, and state meetings just to keep updated on what's going on. And I've been on this committee now for maybe 2 or 3 years, I think. And it's interesting how everything just gels together now, because I'm also on the side, I'm working with some other curriculum stuff. So it's interesting the way things are meant to work together. And unfortunately, I can't stay here the full session. I've got another engagement I've got to be at 6 o'clock. So.
Well, thank you for coming while you can.
Yeah.
I'm Amy Hart. We are military. I have 2 kids. Watershed and one at Joey. And I just started my doctoral program in trauma.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Grant Guy, I'm the elementary principal at Wood River. This is my 8th year there, and my second meeting on this committee. So happy to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Tara Devon. I teach out on Eielson, 7th grade math this year and high school geometry, and this is my second year on this committee and my 20th year teaching.
I'm Paula Addis. I'm a teacher here in the district. I teach little kids, 2nd and 3rd grade. Well, not little, smaller than
You're smaller than mine.
Yeah. This is my 15th year of teaching, and I don't know how many years I've been on the committee. I was appointed before we changed the dynamics of the committee.
Okay. I'm Jennifer Morgan. I am your point of contact for the committee. So if you have questions, you can give me a call or email me.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I love this committee. Someone was asking beforehand how the other committees are doing and if they have empty seats and do they. And we usually do pretty well. Right now we have one vacant parent and one at large, but we have very consistent attendance and highly engaged participants. So it's always fun to have you guys come around. I appreciate that. So our first order of business will be approval of the agenda. If there's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any objection to approving the agenda? All right. Seeing none, we're going to approve it. We're 1 for 1. All right. Let's go for the approval of the minutes. And if you need some time to look, feel free. They were long. The last meeting was when we had discussion about the new curriculum process and some discussion about what that might look like and where the priorities might be. So
I move to adopt with a minor edit on page 2, second paragraph, where it says teachers and administrators were surveyed in the spring of 2018.
To survey. Thank you for catching that. So we will make that grammatical correction as a friendly correction. Is there a second to approving the minutes?
Second.
And I can give you more time to look at it? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you. And if we catch something that, if I rushed you, you let me know and we can go through. So the last meeting we started talking about the overview of our curriculum processes. Right now, this year, we don't have any active curriculum being drafted or revised. So this year, we will be starting in January, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And so sort of the nature of our business today will just sort of be an overview of where we're going with the process. And I'm going to ask you guys to give some feedback and sort of help us to sort of draft that. Thank you to our guests. We have Christina Rohrig, who is the secondary curriculum coordinator. And so she will be running and facilitating a bunch of our curriculum revision this spring. So she wanted to be able to come and sort of check things out. And also to Mrs. Sinclair's husband and child for being here as our guest as well. So I have to stand up because I've been sitting. Sorry, we've had lots of meetings. And also because my clicker's not working. So that's another reason. But so we, for those of you who have been here, we spent some time last spring survey. We sent a survey out to all teachers and administrators about sort of where are we at with curriculum. Lots of discussion, lots of things happening around that, including how our website looks, how our curriculum guides look. So today we're going to talk sort of just about that revision process because I would love to get some input from the wide variety that's here. Out of that, though, what I think is important are sort of our guiding principles that came from teachers and the message that we got, which we're making sure that we think about students at the center of learning, and that as we're making decisions, we're thinking about what is that experience like for students. Reiterating this idea that we really are looking at student-centered sort of personalizing learning. Our language in our district is the core 4. There's a lot of literature around personalized learning, and it can mean lots of different things. But we talk about it in terms of data-driven decisions, student choice and ownership, targeted instruction. That's sort of how we talk about instruction. Also, the idea that we really do trust our teachers as professionals to decide on that mix of the instructional recipe for figuring out how to get that across. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting teachers in that way. We do believe, though, that equity is important and that there's common standards and that our there's some non-negotiables is how I sort of think of them, is that fourth grade should be fourth grade and not necessarily dependent simply on your zip code or do you luck out with a certain teacher or not. And that as we package our materials, that we know that teachers, just like students, have different needs. And so trying to look at communicating in such ways that we can meet teachers where they're at. Some of us like a lot of structure and a lot of guidelines. Some of us want to be told sort of, here's your target, you figure out where to get there. And so sort of trying to make that balance sort of on both of those things. If you have questions or if there's comments as we go, just holler out.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Peterson.
So I raised this last time.
Yeah.
And I'll raise it again in bullet 3. I don't know if you mean to say that teachers decide on the materials or the mix of practices and materials as a unitary idea. So if you're thinking of it as the teacher has the freedom to mix their instructional practice with the materials that are provided by the district, then I understand it. But if you're saying they have the ability to decide both the instructional practices and the materials separately, we're going to run into a difficulty because you're going to have 50 English teachers choosing 50 different books, and we don't have the budget for that. And then that also defeats your idea of fourth grade is fourth grade is fourth grade.
So, that's a good point. When I talk about curriculum, when we talk about curriculum in our world, we're talking about the what. So, the what we want students to know, understand, and be able to do. The how to get there, do you do it by, direct instruction, or are we going to do centers? Those are where there's that teacher professional judgment. It gets tricky, and as one of the things we're going to look at is English language arts this year. And historically in high school English curriculum, the what has been, we're all going to read this book. And there's been a lot of discussion among English teachers, well, what are we supposed to get out of it? So even though we all read Romeo and Juliet in 9th grade, Tara her students focus on understanding iambic pentameter and the historical context of Romeo and Juliet, whereas Mrs. Addis is teaching Romeo and Juliet because it examines the fundamental questions of choice and love and law, So with personalized learning, and part of that is sort of like, let's talk about what is our what, and sometimes that what and how come together, and I think it's going to really vary by curriculum. So I think that's one of the things we're going to be figuring out as we go, I think. So.
But part of the curriculum process has always been, we spend 80% of our time putting together the what, and then that last 20% is, and these are the books you do it with.
Right.
And so the issue becomes, is that being removed from what the curriculum process is all about, is the choice of materials, because that's a twofold decision to be made. One is it's an educational decision as to what that material is and what it consists of, and two, it's a budgetary issue. And
so I will share sort of where we are currently, because remember this is a developing sort of process, and then I think I don't want to spend too much time on this one, Bruce. So currently, last year, we purchased Journeys as our K-6 English Language Arts package. Our previous one had basically, the life had run out. We had no more, we couldn't find print materials. We couldn't get into the online things. So the question is that we rolled that out this year was, do we have to use Journeys? And my belief as the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning is that always before, there was when I came into the district, there was a message of you have to use the adopted materials in the way the district told you to use them. And what happened was some of us said, yes, thank you for those materials. I will teach them the way I'm supposed to teach them. And then I went into my classroom, I put them on the shelf, and I did whatever the heck I wanted to do. So I come from this perspective of even when we adopted the textbooks, people didn't always teach them. So so what I want to know is our kids learning what we want them to learn to the level we want them to learn it. So what that does though is it puts a lot more pressure on principals. Because if my kids aren't learning and you say, Miss Hadaway, what are you using to teach reading? And I say, well, I found these things on Teachers Pay Teachers, and then I have these books that I used when I started teaching 40 years ago, and the principal says, yeah, they're not learning. Then we have a different conversation. So where we end up with that, I think as we move through this next year of curriculum, that's going to be a fundamental question of how much do we want to require it. And I always think of, I can think of a couple of elementary teachers who are like masters of teaching reading. They are teaching reading better than probably, than our textbooks, right? But then we have other teachers who really need that structure. So that's where that playlist comes in. So that's where we are right now. I don't know if that's the right place to be. But we're sort of trying to work through, I think, some of those issues. Mr. Neal.
So I know you want to move on. I don't want to dwell on that, but I do think it's really important discussion to have.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, where do you see that discussion taking place?
So as we move forward, I'm going to talk about the curriculum process. So as we get to that how, as we move from the what to the how, I think that discussion is going to be really important. And it will also be a part of the what. Are we just requiring a certain number of books, or do we really want to see certain outcomes? Like here's what we want them to know when they read that. So I think it's going to evolve throughout this next spring and into next year as we start to work through some of that. So this committee will have some of those groups of teachers will have those discussions. So we'll see that sort of play out in different ways.
And then I have one other unrelated question. The first bullet point there talks about students and being at the center of learning. So what role do students have in the curriculum decision-making process?
So that's a really good question, right? Historically, our curriculum process has started with teachers. And teachers have come together and looked at the current curriculum and said, here's where we think we need to shift and and then it's gone out for public comment. And that it goes to sort of a wide variety. We have not specifically surveyed students or said, hey, students, there's a new English curriculum, or hey, fourth graders, there's a new fourth grade curriculum. But one of the questions I'm going to ask later today is how do we make sure we're representing those different voices and bringing those pieces in. So this again is what we sort of found from the curriculum. So the survey, and I sort of try to use that as a high level kind of lens to sort of remember where we're at. We have sort of 3 ongoing processes for curriculum revision. One is a formal, every 6 years we pull a curriculum and we do a comprehensive review. And that's what we'll be starting with this spring with secondary English language arts and with K-12 social studies. So that's a formal multi-year process. And so there's been some changes in what that looks like. The second is this middle one, we're still developing, we're trying to figure it out. But I would like to get us to a place where we can have some regular checks. And I'm thinking like once a semester, some way we can sort of do a dipstick check-in and say, how are things working? So we've gotten that this year. We have, with Journeys that we adopted, there's been a class that's been meeting, and so teachers have been talking about how are the materials working. Here's how I'm using them. I've had a hard time with, I don't think they taught this unit well. How are things going? And that's been really valuable. So we're trying to sort of figure out how do we build that. And then more of an ongoing, so if a teacher is feeling like, the curriculum says to teach the Neolithic Revolution, and our textbook is lame on the Neolithic Revolution and I need some better materials, what else is out there? So a way for us to be able to close that gap. Right now the district has, we've just pulled in something called Let's Talk. If you go to the district website, on the bottom right hand corner of every page is this little orange button that says Let's Talk. And you can choose a topic and you can say curriculum, and people can say, you know, the 9th grade whatever needs help, or I don't have materials in my building, where do I go to get those, or I don't understand what this means, or whatever their question is. I'll be sending, I have an email out to all teachers within the next few days that sort of says, here's the update on where we are and here's what that is. So that'll be a new process that's coming through. Jennifer has just been training me on how to use it. What I like about it is that it's sort of like a work order system, and that when it comes in, I can assign it and say, Christina, answer that question. I can see that she's answered it, and then also we have a record. So if I can look at, like, man, we have 6 7th grade science teachers who have emailed us in the last few months, we got something going on. So that's I'm hoping we'll solve that other one. So trying to look at those. Yes.
Just for clarification, it's only for teachers, or is that for parents or students?
Parents and students is on, and I can show you. But if you go to the district webpage, so they have all sorts of topics. And what I'm trying to navigate is I hate that there's like such a long drop down that you're like, oh, I'm tired of scrolling. I forgot. I don't even get to curriculum because I'm scrolling. So how do we do that? But like there's for assessment. So if you have questions about testing, I know they've got a lot of questions about Alice. You know, that's been a hot community topic. So some of those kind of things. And so we're instituting that across the. So you can see sort of, again, this is a process that we're building, and we don't have it all figured out, but that's sort of the end goal of where we'd like to go. Deborah, did you have your hand? Did you have another question?
For that mid-level step, you said you're kind of still figuring that out.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you want input from this group, or is that just?
I'm always welcome to have input. If you guys have thoughts, I don't know whether we'll bring it as a topic for a specific discussion. It kind of depends on where we end up with some other things. But if you have thoughts of that, you're always welcome to come tell me, or I can take you for a cup of coffee and you can tell me that way, or whatever. So here's where we're about to embark. So starting in January, and we sent out an email to K-12 social studies teachers already. We'll be sending one out to English soon. I try not to overwhelm people with like 4 big emails at one time. But starting in January, we're really going to try to spend some time starting what I'm calling that research and review phase. So we have a survey that will be sent to you guys. It just went out to teachers, but we'll have an email for you, and I'm going to send it to a whole bunch of other folks. I think it's going to be really important, for example, that FNA and TCC have a chance to weigh in, and they have an education department. That I would like to send it to our CTE advisory committee, which is business people in the community. So it will be shared far and wide. And then we're also, right now, we have scheduled a meeting of teachers during the school day, and we have 2 afternoon and evening meetings scheduled for teachers who can't make it during the school day who might be interested. And the goal really is to try to reflect on our current effectiveness, and also start that process of what is our vision for a graduate in this subject area. So in English, for example, what do we as a community, what do we as parents, what do we as teachers expect a kid to know and be able to do when they come out of our schools? If they do everything they're supposed to do, and and starting with that as a building of our program, and I think, and I'll pick on math because Tara's here, but I remember one time a conversation with a parent when I first moved into central office who said, my kid's got great grades and they're going to this really good school, but he can't even he doesn't know anything about interest or balancing his checkbook. Now, most of us, I don't know how many people have checkbooks anymore. I still like to balance mine because I'm old school. But, so there was this sense of there's some practical stuff that the community expected our kids to have, and this student had gone all the way through AP calculus and had all sorts of math knowledge, but might have been potentially missing something that as a community people thought this is important. So that's sort of the work of the spring will sort of be, what does that look like? And my plan is that if that work can be done sort of January to April, and then sending sort of a draft of that out in May that sort of says, here's what we're thinking. What do you think? And again, it's a pilot process, and there's still a lot of room. So it's not as if that's going to lock anyone into anything, but sort of an update on where we're at. Next fall then will be that define and develop, which really is will bring teachers in. So looking at the research, looking at the input from people in the spring, how do we backwards plan to make sure that students are sort of getting what we want them to get? And that will be where we look at, do we need to revise our curriculum? And this is where one of my English teacher colleagues, I thought was going to take me out last week, because I said, for example, and I don't have an answer to this, but should we deny a student a diploma if they don't pass British literature? Is that still a relevant, valuable skill that we think they have to graduate? Because I can tell you I think Shakespeare is pretty awesome and important, but is that going to be right now that's a requirement. So some of those kind of questions might need to be asked. Again, not that I have an answer. I thought she was going to kill me. But it was just a question. I don't know that our curriculum process has had a lot of space for those kind of conversations before. We've always sort of started with English teachers, and if you ask English teachers, of course you're going to have to require it. So this is sort of just trying to spin that a little bit. If it fails miserably, we'll try a different one. Yes, ma'am.
So this committee has never had like those kind of conversations? Because I'm thinking like in math we've had those like curriculum conversations as teachers, like do kids really need to take algebra 2, right? Like that's the math class that gets asked about, but this committee doesn't usually.
They do, but usually it's later in the process. So usually it's teachers having that conversation, and then it comes to this group to have that conversation. And I would like us, and this group will still have those conversations throughout. But math is a great example. The math, when we did math in 2015, the math, and some of you were here, the math curriculum that first came forward in a first draft had no honors math classes. And math teachers talked about the fact that the standards are the standards, and we don't necessarily want to have multiple layers. And they had a conversation in a meeting that I think you were there, that sometimes the kids in honors are there because they just are better kids, not necessarily because they're better math kids. And there was this whole discussion. It came to and that was months of math teacher discussion. It came to the curriculum committee, and it was very clear, and parents were very vocal that we want honors level classes. We want those options for our students. Then it had to go back, and it was like, it was a frustrating experience for some of our math folks who had this whole conversation. And so it's been a little back and forth. So I would like us to start with some input from the greater community, and again, still leaving it with teachers, but trying to sort of go backwards.
Is this a year-and-a-half process because this is a new way of doing it, and we would anticipate getting better at it, and then compressing this to a 12-month process for other subjects going forward, or do we see them all as being this year-and-a-half process?
So historically it was a 2-year process. We used to have that, what I'm calling review and research used to be what they called a current trends year. Okay. And so that, and then so that writing year is sort of has always been a year. If we can, I'm hoping to compress it. I would like us to have, we're going to have teachers in the week of August, and they're going to draft something, and I'm hoping that we can take it to the school board by December, whereas oftentimes we're still in that review and draft and revise stage until April and May. So it's going to be fluid. And then Faye, I think, was going to ask a question, and then Deborah.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm glad that we've got some math people here. Sid Fred's this week. Friend came by with her granddaughter. The granddaughter wanted to buy something, a little pajama thing. It was $30 and 50% off. This is the 11-year-old, and she could not come up with an answer of what is half of 30. She did not know her 5s, 10s, so she would come up with answers like 21, 23, and then she had a calculator, and she came up with 17. So at 11, I mean, do you get to graduate from elementary school if you cannot do 5, 10, 15, 20? What's half of 30?
So there's a lot of layers to that. Okay? We don't necessarily. I mean, we don't have a you must be at X to move to the next grade. And actually, and people always think I'm crazy, but the research is that when you retain students, you dramatically decrease the likelihood of a good outcome. Mm-hmm. So if a kid is retained, the chances of them graduating from high school go way, way down. And so for whatever reason, and we can debate that. So there's that answer. I think the other piece is there always is going to be student variance. So there's probably 11-year-olds who can calculate 16 different ways, and there's 11-year-olds. So I think that's one of my hopes as we move forward with curriculum are kind of what are the big ideas. So there are in math, there's however many standards at each grade level, but they boil down to 3 or 4. Here's the real core. Yeah. So I'm hoping we'll do a better job of saying here's what they need to be able to do. And so there's some have tos and some nice tos. So I think that as we move forward with curriculum revision, my hope is that instead of having a huge long list of here's everything and it looks all equal, that we'll start to be able to say 9th grade English, here's the really big things they have to know, here's the other things that are the nice to knows, and here's some maybe extra bonus things. So that's my vision, but we'll see whether people agree when they start when teachers get into that process. Deborah.
So in the review and research stage, you mentioned teachers in that subject area having a conversation, and you mentioned this group having a conversation, and then a survey that would kind of go out to a broader audience. Will there be an opportunity for members of the community and parents to have conversations around these things? Because I think that we do these surveys a lot. Depending on how well designed the survey is, it's going to lead to specific types of responses, or people might not think about certain things because they're thinking about this experience they had yesterday as opposed to the bigger picture. Whereas in conversation, we iterate on each other's ideas and can have a dramatically different result.
So there were 3 big questions that we had in our last meeting, and that we were going to focus sort of on for today. And the first one, and I was going to ask you guys, and we're going to spend some time on, is what is the best way to get some of that stakeholder input at the beginning. Right now, what we have scheduled is a meeting for teachers during the school day. We have a meeting for the community and any people who want to attend during the school day or work day, and one in the evening, because we know that some of our other stakeholders, people from the university perhaps, or I'm thinking of a conversation I had with a colleague at FNA. She's like, it's better for me if I can come. That's part of my work. I want to be there. Evening, I got to go home to my kid. Right? So creating a daytime conversation and an evening conversation. And those Christina, are those dates already scheduled?
Yes.
Okay. The 30th. You don't have to know them right now. Our idea is we'll have the survey, and we'll bring that survey sort of to these meetings, a meeting of teachers, a meeting of community, and then that information will come back here. So because I like everybody talking, not sitting, what I was going to suggest is that you talk to the person next to you, spend just a couple of minutes. What do you think? What's going to be our best way to, or what are some things we need to really know about getting that stakeholder input at the beginning of the process? Surveys, again, hit and miss, and if some parents get those, some don't. Community meetings, again, historically we haven't had good attendance, so I'm worried a little bit about it. I want to make the effort and create that opportunity and beat the bushes with some personal invites, but we haven't always had that. So talk to your neighbor, if you will, or if you guys are all hostile towards that, Blair, you can just shout them out loud about what might be some things to think about, or what's a good way for us to go about trying to do that, to get that feedback early in the process.
How much feedback are you thinking? Because any survey, 10%, 25% is probably most you're going to get back anyway.
Right. And our survey is pretty basic. It's like 5, very general. The first one that we put out is themes of social studies, like how important is civics education, What do you want us to know? How important is geography? What do you want us to know? Sharon?
So I'm just thinking how other organizations have had successful outcomes in doing something similar to this. So like TCC, they might have a table for a drawing. If you complete this, you'll be entered for a drawing. Another way I think we can use a current gathering is the A&E. They have quarterly gatherings, I think potlatches, where they have really good participation. So that might be another way to do, fill this out. You'll be entered.
So us go to them.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Alaska Native Ed.
I noticed social media is a really good way because I've actually seen surveys that came from the district on Facebook. And but you could also share share for a contest or drawing. If you share this, or there's a way to have somebody give their email, and they can be after they do the survey. And but it's still anonymous.
But it's right.
Is there right now a social media contact between the school and the parents individually?
We have a couple of options. So we have, and Jennifer, I'm going to look at you if I forget something. So we have, a Facebook and a district Twitter and those things. We oftentimes can do a push out through Power School. So when they log in, there's a banner. We can also send emails to parents through some of those formats. So we'll do some of those things. We've had pretty good luck with, the one that went to teachers, social studies teachers earlier this week. I said, please forward to anybody you know. And when I looked today before I got here, we've gotten, several responses. Thank you, ma'am. If you think of anything else, well, let me know. So we're already, and some of them indicated that they were parents, and so it's gotten spread a little bit already. But we haven't done a big push out yet. So we've got a couple of different ways.
Is cold calling are you able to do that?
I don't know. But that's something we can look into. Again, I'm just trying to, to see.
It is tough because you've got to have somebody who's really good at it, and that's another whole set of skills.
After a couple of them, you get it.
Most people don't answer the phone.
People don't answer the phone.
I don't answer the phone if I don't know it.
I just want to feel that anxiety.
Yeah. So Ernest just said to me, we do have what we call in the district the robocalls.
Yeah.
So we have those as well.
Oh.
I think part of it too is the more personal it can be, right? It comes back to the conversation when you're talking about having a conversation versus answering a survey, right? If somebody comes up to me and says, hey, we're looking for input, can you fill out this survey, or can you, I'm more likely to have the conversation real quick and say, oh yeah, I can take 5 minutes and do that. Whereas when it shows up in my email,
it's on my list.
it's on my list of things to do, and then it's not on my screen anymore, right? I've got enough, and so out of sight, out of mind, but it's hard to ignore somebody right in front of you.
So let's get Deborah and then Paula.
So Sharon mentioned going to meetings that are already happening. That's a great idea. I think you could do that same thing with other stakeholder groups. So when you're looking at particularly at ELA, you can go to the University Department of Ed, for example, and see if they are already having a meeting or are willing to have a meeting that you can have that conversation with them, as opposed to trying to get people to go to something else. But again, what Tara was just saying was that personal connection of if you identify people, leverage the existing connections you already have, and find individuals and say, we would like your input.
So
in
does that
addition to
mean
having
an
an
open
open
meeting?
That's
And get that group to be doing those individual things at the school?
Right. So these again, I think we and Jennifer and I have talked about, and Christina and I about sending. We used to sort of do that here you send the email, dear, hello, and it goes to this PTA and this one, but actually sending individualized sort of just those emails to make that connection. I'm sorry, Paul, I cut you off.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was also thinking PTA, but also, at least at our school, we have science night and different nights, like having someone there, maybe from the district with a table with the survey ready and like forms to fill out or whatever, just so that would get the parents there. And some parents that they might not answer it the phone, but they would be at the after school night.
And my hope is that, again, we're sort of piloting it this spring to see how it goes, but as we build it for math next year, which starts to come out, we start to create some systems that we could do this as well. So, any other, if you think of things, like I say, this will be building. So the other two big questions from last time were how do we address those sort of non-academics? And I was thinking about our conversation, and so I'm gonna share some things with you guys that hopefully will help sort of help me communicate what I don't always communicate well myself. And then the other is this profile of a graduate approach. I'm really trying to start with backwards planning. So as a teacher, I tried to start, okay, what do I want them to learn in this unit? And then I write my test, and then I go back and I try to figure out how do I teach them to get them there. So trying again to think about that idea of if civics and an awareness of the voting process is important, and the community says that and teachers say that, how do we build that experience all the way back K-12 so that we're scaffolding students to get to that point? So that's sort of my hope and my vision. And we just had, at the school board meeting Tuesday night, Daniel Domke, who's our CTE director, and Robin Taylor, who's the principal of Hutchinson High School, shared this comprehensive career tech ed report. They were talking about, they did a huge process where they were looking at what do employers want, where are the jobs in Alaska, and they sort of use the same process by starting with some of those questions and then looking at what kind of CTE program do we need to build. And there was over and over again, there was discussion about critical skills for success in adult life that are not necessarily content specific. So the question becomes, whose job is it to teach that? And if it's important and we want it in our graduates, then my feeling is that we need to make sure we try to build that into a system as opposed to, let's hope you luck out and got Faye as a teacher because she'll teach you how to work together, whereas if you got Melanie, you're feral, everybody fights for themselves. So how does that work? So I'm going to just share, this hit me really well. I went to a conference because under the new Every Student Succeeds Act and the Carl Perkins, which is a Career Tech Education Act, we have to start looking at more integration between careers and what they're calling future ready in academics. And this gentleman that did the keynote was all focused on 2030. And I know last time we watched the video about in 2028. So these are some of so I just wanted to sort of share some of the different ideas that he put out, because these are the sort of things that and I really would look forward to you guys having a conversation about how do we, which of these values might be important to us as a community group or as teachers, and then how do we start to structure that and where might that look like? Because they don't fall into a math curriculum or English curriculum or a science curriculum necessarily. So just a couple of things. One of the things he talked about was, and this is I think from the Bureau of Labor or Department of Labor, what's the probability that a robot's going to take your job in the next 20 years? Christina, will you turn off one of the banks of lights for us? And a 1 equals certainty. So telemarketers is a 0.99. So if you're a telemarketer, that probably there's odds are good that in 20 years your job may not exist, or else it's existed but it's being performed by a robot. Accountants and auditors, and we had huge discussion about that. If it's a rote, routine skill, it can be automated. And so if it's totally numbers and determining balances, then that's more likely to be automated than things that are non-cognitive. So that was an interesting piece just to think about. Recreational therapists, dentists, athletic trainers. What, to me, when you look at what do those things have in common? What, Grant?
No robotic clergy.
No robotic clergy. And why would that make sense?
Because you're working with an individual.
It's personal, right? And the problem, if you're counseling me and you're counseling Ernest, you're probably having to have 2 different conversations. You can't repeat that same conversation. So that was just an interesting piece.
Huh. Actors gonna be robots.
What did you say, actor?
The other was, to me, this was interesting because what I think I said last time, as a teacher, I've heard people say, well, there's always fast food, right? There's always McDonald's. Not anymore. The kiosk, McDonald's isn't hiring people. There's a kiosk where you order your food.
Yeah.
And cook
So,
it, matter of fact.
Pardon?
And cook it.
Right? So by 2030, there's 60 million workers in these careers that could very likely by 2030 have jobs that are automated. They already have self-driving trucks in Colorado. They're piloting them. And actually, even though you hear every once in a while about self-driving car having an accident, they're still so much safer in terms of statistics than they are than a human-powered car. So again, looking at where the jobs are now and where our jobs might be in 20. So if I want to prepare my students to be able to take care of themselves in the future, how might we need to look at shifting our curriculum in order to prepare students for that? This was interesting to me as well. And I was not familiar with the term the gig economy. And now I have a daughter who's living in that. So when I graduated, I wanted a job that I could go to, that I could put in my time and get my gold pencil at the end of my 25 years and be good to go. I have a daughter who turned 24 today. She and her boyfriend live in Atlanta, which is not a cheap city. They each have about 5 jobs. One of the things they do is that they have scooters, these electric scooters that are in cities now. They call it, they go and get the birds, which are the scooters. They bring them home and charge them, and then they take them back and they hook them back up at what's called the nest, and they get paid every time they deliver a charged scooter to the nest. She's working as a nanny about 20 hours a week. She's doing cold calling for the Human Rights Campaign. She's got about 5 different things that she does. And when she gets tired of one, she stops doing it, and she seems to be able to find another way to support it. She's not asked me for money in a while, at least. So what scares me as a parent is how, when she's 70 and too old to be going and charging up the scooters, how is she going to take care of herself? And so, but that's good, bad. That's my values and views. So I don't know how all of this is going to play out. But again, so my thinking is, as teachers, as curriculum, do we need to be shifting anything to help prepare these people for this kind of world? And again, I don't know the answer. This was also interesting to me. The cost of education versus the financial return of higher education. So we oftentimes, this idea of you'll need this when you go to college, is that always the best advice for our students? Now, we know that they need higher education or training or something, but when I was graduating from high school, going to college meant I was going to make more money. That's not, so my reality of a long time ago, I'm not going to say how long ago, but that's not our reality now with students. So how does that, I don't know how it plays out or if it even does, but I just thought it was interesting. This also was interesting to me, and this was from the Center for Workforce Ethics, talking about what are the skills that are the hardest to hire and the most essential. And I just thought, again, as we talk about those non-academic skills that we want students to have, and where do we teach them and how do we teach them? And I think, Earl, this goes to your point about where the how and the what, to me, sometimes come together. Because it's not just about can you apply the Pythagorean theorem, but can you decide when to use it and solve when you have to apply it in a different way or when you have to adapt it? And then how do we do that? So, again, I don't see Shakespeare on that essential skills, which makes me a little sad. But, and again, I always... Pardon?
A robot replaced him.
A robot replaced him. And again, I'm not saying that that's not valuable, because I can tell you why reading Shakespeare helps you become a better human being and why it develops empathy, which is very important. and why it helps you understand your values and your culture, where we come from, so we don't make those mistakes. But again, I think in terms of going forward with curriculum, how does it need to be considered? Yes, Deborah.
I just put my plug in that in library standards, every single one of those skills on
that is correct. And I would say the mathematical practices are there.
Yep.
We do have librarians who have already been invited to participate in the curriculum process, by the way. So we're trying to make sure we keep that. And then this was just the last, comes from Harvard University, but that 85% of job success comes from those, what we call soft skills. So again, when we talk about our school systems that are preparing students for success after high school, what does that really mean? And I know, and Sharon, it was great to have Sharon, she said in other organizations, that's why this committee is so valuable. I've been in school since I was 5. That's all I know, right? So, we getting that perspective from other people about how does it work elsewhere, I think is going to be important as we build a good product. So that's that last piece. Thanks, Chris. You can turn the lights back on. So this time I'm going to ask you to get together with a partner. You can walk around if you're falling asleep. But I'd like you to spend a couple of minutes talking with somebody else in the room about what do we think about these two questions. It may be, Hadaway, you're totally whack. None of that applies. It may be, that's recorded. It may be, I think, what are those skills? Or, yes, it makes sense. And I'm not trying to diminish the importance of academics, please. I know that sometimes I'm sort of a smart aleck, and I apologize for that. But how, I think this is a real, there's a lot of pieces here that I don't think things are always the way they have been. And we're in new ground. So what I'm hoping is that you'll spend, until about 6:35 getting up and talking with somebody, and then I just would like us to get some ideas on this, because I think it will help us take our curriculum revision process forward in terms of how does that process look and what do we need to create for the people working on that. Does that make sense? All right. So I'm going to ask you to get up or move around and find a partner, or if you want to just talk to whoever's next to you. But what do we think as answers to this question?
I know. Let's move, at least make a bigger impact like we did before.
I always really I don't express it, but I really appreciate you. You're better about memorizing. Good. What I can't imagine. To your body.
Drive a truck as opposed to the guy that said I've been driving a truck for 20 years, I can drive 18 years drive a truck. That guy gets a cop. Still, this guy that said I can drive a truck went golfing, hit him at Walmart, whatever. He knows that guy.
Can you share this with me so I can give it to Sharon or put it on our website?
Yeah.
Everyone hires what they want.
And you send it out to the family.
Okay, now I have to marry that. So jobs now look the same. It's hard to keep kids.
The other thing is how these things, college graduates, or whatever.
I don't know anybody.
You don't have the skills to get yourself out there.
Right. So that's the thing that I don't you learn any. Well, and that's
almost like Harvard too. I don't know if I'm going to recording, but it ends. It's on your term, so it ends May.
how to do that. It's all just how to learn how to do math and it's science.
I'll just wait until they tell me.
Or I can go
You know, so, but I have that confidence.
How do you think how to,
And this is where I'm going to start have this
how do we
conversation.
do these engaging, the whole set of skills?
Skills and help you.
How to read this, not for.
But how do we measure that? That's not part of the content I'm supposed to teach, but I am measuring your progress. You know, like where does it?
Well, I think for you guys who are older, you need to be already there at the time.
All sets of skills, one class. Every freshman takes this, no matter what.
And it's kind of unique, so, other than this is the curriculum, you have to this, it's life skills that you need to learn this. You understand this stuff,
And then I don't know.
multiple times, my work is used to.
That's part of it.
So many of them, right? I'm working just as much as math. And they don't talk to me. You get that mindset, and you hear it all the time. Grade 5, this guy got 5 years. I have that 2 years. He got 2 years. So now when I go, we really are dependent. I know this sounds crazy, but try to get a PhD. Tell you that school right now, whatever, back then,
collaborative work.
tell you if this is not expired, we're trying to get this attraction in this new record. That is the hill that get the you don't want to have a house in school, so that's what you have.
It's also trying to find out
And if in school,
for the
you got to be intern. You can't
trials themselves,
keep having a good time.
where they fall within a
Well, I think that there are
academically. I know the workplaces are exciting
You see a number of things
see that a lot. Times where you better follow. You're going to athletic baking. I can joke you
Christina, that is a class called adulting. You're like a junior. Might be a good idea. You know, when I was in high school, we took a quarter class. I was on checkbook and other kinds of typewriting. It's all those things that you need to know. Yeah. I took none of it, and I was totally clueless.
When I was in
First time I got my first real job. For the state department and natural resources. To make it more to me. I needed a vehicle. So I knew that people like shop around to try to get a better price and all that. So I did called up to Anchorage. I was just about on the thing where I bought a new truck. I was so proud of myself when I financed it. And I got home, my dad said, no one taught me how to have much. 12%. Oh my goodness. And my dad was like, and it was a small town. And he's like, no. And he drove all the way back. And he chewed this guy. And he was like, you know, this 19-year-old kid, you're totally taking advantage. You know, it's so negotiated and it was much better. But, you know, it was never on my radar. I didn't know anything about it. Here's this day I don't like that. My husband knows. Yeah. The next time we need to actually check it. Take them up for this week. The price.
You still have your locker. Right. So I know you're here for your high school.
I'm not sure actually what's lucky for us, but my high
experience based on community based skills that are separate from just
nobody knew we had 3 tracks.
So we'll go for about another minute, and then I'm going to ask each group just to share out their thoughts on the first question and the second question.
We had 3 tracks, 2 graduations.
Yeah, if we don't have enough time to get on those very in-depth questions, just so you know.
Well, you know what? I'm sure that whatever you share.
We haven't even scratched the surface of the first bullet.
We have the knowledge and understanding of the skills that you want to see the graduate goes to instead of academic skills that you just test out.
I just, you guys figure it out.
There's a set of other requirements that you can do with the graduation requirements.
Right.
That you can
So
do
like,
things like
my
Everyone's
senior level English, well, that's everything.
You build
Class,
parents
right?
did one certain thing, and I have certain things that I wanted
and
my
if there
kids
may
to
be
make.
requirements
How
around
to write a cover
So
letter.
it's trying to find, okay, again, what are those soft skills that we need to teach? Because I have some parents that are just, you are not there to raise my child. And I have some parents that they that's the expectation.
For a certain number of hours to get out of the
All right. Good conversation. And one of the groups pointed out that this was not nearly enough time to solve the problems of the universe. And so please know that these are going to be sort of the ongoing challenges as we move through sort of a new curricular process. As I hope that we are thinking about some of these things as well as simply just that academic content. And again, we're sort of piloting some new things this spring with English Language Arts and Social Studies, and then when we get to math next year, we'll tweak that process. And my hope is that we can continue to improve and make sure it's working. So, how should curriculum address or Grant, did you want to add something?
I was going to answer first bullet.
Okay, first bullet question. What do you guys want to say about the first bullet question?
So we talked about a lot, but I'm just something, and I won't even speak for the group, but we talked a little bit about standards-based report cards. So kindergarten, first grade, starting to integrate more of those standards-based report cards. I think we're going to see some of those soft skills start to come up in those standards-based report cards because it is just such a fundamental skill to have, especially at the kindergarten and first grade level. I don't know how far we're going to go with those standards-based report cards. I don't know what the plan is overall. If we're going to continue to kind of move up in second grade and third grade is going to end up with those as well. But that's, I think, a really good way to start addressing some of those non-academic skills because they are very important, and parents do need to know, hey, can my kid get along with someone else or someone that they don't necessarily like? If I were to put them in a group with this kid right here and they didn't get to choose, can they get along? Can they finish the task at hand? So that was one of the things that came out of our discussion.
Okay. How about other groups on question number 1?
I think we go ahead. We wrote. We talked about a couple different things. One thing we talked about was multiple pathways to graduation, that everybody doesn't have to necessarily go down the same exact lockstep path of what, kind of that bridge split question of what they learn to get where they want to go. And then we also talked about having a common set of standards, for lack of a better word, that are those soft skills that
to be injected into every class.
Yes. And then
math, social studies, because the collaborative workplace that I've heard so much about that's coming in the future, the successful models all have teams that are diversified, which means you have everybody, and everybody's skill set is valuable.
And then you would allow the teachers in those disciplines to have those conversations about what does this look like in our discipline. And in math you can use problem-based, inquiry-based problem solving strategies. You can ask students to describe processes to other students to practice their oral communication and leadership and so forth. So how do these things look in these different disciplines to practice these soft skills?
Cool. All right.
We were saying the same thing. It should be tied into an external class sort of. So in order to graduate, 9th grade do a community project. So the 9th grade class get together and go out and get it to the community and actually figure out how to network with the community, whether it's a business, whether it's a senior citizen home, or whatever it is. But as a group, network with them and learn those skills and learn the networking skills and the to get a job, mostly is 85% networking, and the rest of it is chance or where you are. So you have to learn how to do that, how to make connections, and how to grow connections, and continue connections. And you don't get that necessarily in school and academic side of the house.
Society as a whole is getting unconnected.
Yeah. A lot of unconnected. They're connected. It's this. You can find a job doing this, and you may be great, but that robot again.
It's funny. One of the things that came up, he had 5 recommendations, which I didn't. I mean, it could be a whole class, but one of them was the role of apprenticeships, of getting young people with in work situations and life situations where they have to apply what they're doing in a work kind of place. So you really have to look for that, and it's hard to get college kids to thinking they're having fun, and so you're a junior now. You have to find an internship. Paid or unpaid, either way, you have to get some experience in the degree you're trying to get. So you'll be recognized now as having some experience and education. And they graduate, I graduated and I can't find a job. Because you don't know anybody that does what you got a degree in. So you have to, and you really have to, and some colleges do it, but it's hard to get college students to understand that they don't do it for you. You have to do this. You have to have this skill. You have to know where your career, where your industry is, and then go for that. It's like getting a degree in underwater basket weaving. Where you plan to live, there's a whole lot of underwater basket weaving. Perfect degree. Go talk to underwater basket weavers. So now in the junior, I'll be ready to leave the basket next year. Then you'll be okay. But if not, then you're going to run into I can't find a job. You didn't do your whole networking thing. You didn't figure out where the jobs were, what the job's going to be in 10 years, or you had one of the robot jobs. Great, I got this robot job. Here's your robot. So learn to fix the robot now. So you have to be able to do that, and students and everyone have to be able to recognize my job is probably going to be ran by a robot sooner or later. I better learn how to fix a robot now. So you have to be able to see that, and so I need the skills now to literally figure out where's my job going to be in. And you got to know that by talking to people that are actually in the industry. And we moved your job to a robot already, so now you know why.
So like a lot of schools do a job shadow, but they're kids' senior years, right? Too late. Yeah. Like that's why you're like.
It needs to be at the latest year you can work on those.
So that's one thing. I guess I'm going to just throw it out there, and and perhaps we can revisit it, in the spring. But should there be Christina actually, when I was walking around, said what we need is a required class called adulting, and we give them we require. At some point, one of their, when Hutchinson High School first started, all students were required to take an elective called Career Investigations. And they started their freshman year with an elective that was a career exploration elective. So that would be, we have our graduation requirements that are academic is there would we get to a place where we say, yes, they have to take either this class or these modules, or I have no clue. I'm just saying, so that's just something to think about. Yes, ma'am.
I was also thinking, with that adulting class, there's things that once you get out into the real world, you don't really know what to do, like plan for your retirement or buying health care. What does, a lot of kids don't know what a deductible is, things like that, even if they're
I can't keep it straight.
I was just telling Jen that when I got my first real job and I needed to buy a vehicle, I was really happy because I knew I had to. You're supposed to do your homework and talk about the price and everything else. And so he came down and I had called to Anchorage because I lived in Kenai, and I got a cheaper one, and I went home and to tell my dad how proud I was, and he asked me what my interest rate was on my loan, and I said, I don't know. And so he pulled it out, and it was 12% interest. Now, I lived in a small town where my father was able to say, we're going back over to Soldotna to have a talk with that gentleman about you don't take advantage of 19-year-old girls. But I had no clue, and so it's just funny how and again, that was a long time ago. So the second question. So what knowledge, understanding, skills should a graduate of Fairbanks have? And then how do we build a series of graduation requirements to deliver that graduate? This is a huge question. So thank you. That's okay. I will send you stuff. If you think of anything, let me know. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to talk to this. it's huge. And again, and I don't know that we'll ever get to a consensus about here's what it is. But I think that sort of that discussion about where do we want to head might be helpful in planning. So that was where I'm coming from. So we'll start again with you guys, Grant.
So the other group, and I think it was Deborah that mentioned it, that I think that different pathways is just a phenomenal idea. When I think about what our requirements are for high school and graduation, I think that it fits some kids, but it doesn't fit all kids. When we're talking about personalized learning now, we should be also talking about what that means for a kid that, the idea that every kid needs to have a year and a half of PE. Really? I don't know. I mean, we've got kids that play sports. That's all they do is play sports. But we're still going to require them, and I know there's ways for them to get out of that. But could they benefit more from a different pathway where they are doing some more career exploration or things like that? So I think having the ability to have those pathways set out early so that kids can make some choices, I think would be fantastic. And then shifting what those graduation requirements are for some of those areas, obviously not all, but for some of those areas makes a lot of sense.
Right. Okay. Well, actually, I brought that up with our group because when I went to high school, 15 years ago, we had 3 paths to choose from when we got to high school. It was the college path, the technical path, or a little bit of both.
You had to choose that?
Yeah.
See,
and I did a little bit of both.
We just were putting one of them.
Yeah. I chose the little bit of both, and I said I could use the requirements, and I was able to graduate with a little bit of both. And I've actually done a little bit of both. So.
Nice.
And I think you can. Sorry.
When I was a kid, I lived in Germany. And in Germany, at that time, at 14, you chose where you're going to go. So you could go to trade as an apprentice. You could go to school, which implied college. And they basically had 2 pathways. And I think by 14, something needs to start happening. I don't know what grade that's at, 9th grade?
Yeah, 9th grade freshman and the 8th grade, depends, and the 8th grade, 9th grade, your
my
first
mom
month.
thinking towards something. You should be encouraged to think towards something practical for you.
My mom went to German school.
So,
She started.
did you guys get to that question, Earl and Ernest, and this idea of how you might get there, or what we might want to, how to address this question?
We kind of melded ours together because they kind of go together.
The answer spoke to that.
Yeah.
That's why I was just thinking, Ernest, that your first answer about getting out and getting kids out into the workplace early speaks kind of to that second bullet too of, is that something we should be expecting from a Fairbanks graduate, that they've had some.
Right. Little when they get in the 9th grade, this is just the beginning of your 5-year plan. So the day after you graduate, this is where you started working on that at the 9th grade. So what are you going to do? What skills you need to figure that out? But right now you kind of have coaches, someone holding your hand, but the day of graduation, that hand should kind of be put away now. You're on your hands now. So those skills are something you have to somehow learn. If you didn't learn them in the last 4 years, you're not going to learn them right now. And it really is a hard situation for kids, and they don't know what to do. I'm going to school. And like you say, school is not for everybody. There's tons of jobs, especially this, there's tons of jobs that are a lot more beneficial than going to school for them all the time. Or even 4-year degrees. Everybody think they need a 4-year degree, but there's tons of careers that doesn't need a 4-year degree, and turns out to be pretty lucrative as well. But they all think, I need a 4-year degree. Now, if your career path says you need a 4-year degree, then you need that. But that don't have to be your career path. So they don't understand the option. They just think this is the natural progression. I go from here, I go to the next one.
I think not understanding options is a really powerful statement. So, okay, I don't want to keep you guys here too long. Go ahead, Christina.
I just wanted to kind of bounce off what you said. We need to find a way where we can find the students' skills, their abilities, what they are good at, and what kind of can build from there and give them options that way.
Okay.
Does everyone have to take the ASVAB at high school level?
No.
So, learning a little bit more about that as my wife is a counselor at the high school, I mean, what a fantastic assessment that is for trying to give kids information about what their skill sets versus interests are.
Do you want to? Does everyone know the ASVAB? Do you want to?
I don't know too much about it, honestly, but what my wife was describing is kids take this test and they get to
Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery.
Yeah, and I think that's where some kids then choose not to take it
because it's military.
I'm a military and I don't want to go into the military.
Yeah,
but I mean that's I think why kids choose not to take it because they say, I mean, I teach in an Air Force base and everybody doesn't take it. You would think like that's
and
why.
Again, you may know more about it than I do because I didn't know what it stood for. So that's what me.
Yeah.
I got out of class.
Right.
So what was described to me as the information that you get back is it highlights not only what your skill sets are and how you relate to like your peers across the nation, but it also can break that down by gender, so it will compare you to other males or other females based on whatever that skill set is that you're looking at in particular. So, I mean, when we look at information and giving kids information that then they can use to make a decision, like, wow, hey, I'm really interested in this, and I'm really good at it compared to other kids around the nation, and here's some jobs that I might be interested in looking at more at because not only am I good at this, but I'm interested in it. There's not too many assessments that give that information. It's hard enough to get good information on the standardized assessments we get from the state. So to have that assessment available for kids and for them not to be taking advantage of it because they think I don't want to be in the military, let's come up with more of the civilian side of it. I mean, it sounds like it's fantastic information. I wish I would have taken it when I was that age.
My son did great and it changed his life. Because at 19, he was like a typical kid who did take Shakespeare, did like it, but had no clue, no rudder. Parents said, this is what you should do. You're good at this kind of mechanical engineering thing. You should go into that. That's not true. That's not true. So he took that test and said, you know what they said? I'm good at mechanical engineering. That kind of thing. That's what I'm going to do.
I think one of the crucial things about that test is that it's not about content knowledge.
Yeah.
It's about these skills and
practical.
Yeah, practical applications of these skills. And when students take that test, they think, oh, I'm not like you just said, I wouldn't be good at that. I don't know these things. It doesn't have anything to do with that.
They said it.
Yeah. So, but the test, it's a great experience.
So the other thing that I would say with that in mind is when we talk with parents about what do you want for your kids, I don't hear too many parents saying, I want my kids to be wealthy when they grow up. Most people, they want their kids to do something they enjoy, something that makes them happy, something that they feel like they're making a difference. That test gives them at least a jumping off point to go, okay, these are some of the things that I'm good at. If I didn't enjoy my job, I wouldn't do it. So I want my kids, my own kids, to find something they enjoy doing in addition to being wealthy.
So I'm going to... I just appreciate the conversation. And again, what just to reiterate is I know none of us are saying don't teach math, don't teach English, don't teach social studies. And we have really solid processes in place, or at least pilot processes in place, for how we're going to go about those content pieces. But I think it's becoming more and more as we're having these, again, reports to the board, input from community members, that there's things that we want our kids to know and be able to do that aren't attached to a content area. And I don't know, could that be just including, a teamwork component in every curriculum, making sure? I don't know the answer to that. So I appreciate you guys sort of talking through some of those options of what it might look like. And as we move through social studies and secondary English language arts in the spring, looking for ways for at least these conversations to be a part of the curriculum conversation, whether a change is made or not. I think to create room for some of this as we talk about content. As since my time in the district, I've participated in 3 English revisions, 2 as a teacher and 1 as a coordinator. And we weren't having conversations about the sort of the how or those skills. It was very much simply focused on a lot of that strict content, and I don't know that was a bad thing, but I also want to make sure, just again as a parent, that we're serving kids the best we can. My husband and I moved back to this town because of the education system. So I appreciate if you have other thoughts. And again, as we go through the spring and we have meetings, I'll be keeping you updated, and we'll report on how things are going, and we can see from there. So just just a reminder, in terms of our curriculum processes, we'll be starting in January, and in the spring we'll really be going through that sort of review and research phase. So we'll make sure that comes back as well. Anything else on curriculum process? Yes, ma'am.
I know we're going through this, and you have been to places where you've gotten to intermingle with other people from other districts. Are other districts doing similar things with theirs, or
yes? How it is, I think you guys mentioned standard-based grading.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a shift, and it's been around since I started teaching, and it gets called different things, and it comes, when I started teaching, it was called outcomes-based education. We've had mastery learning. Right now, it's the term they're using are competency-based education, and it's that idea of starting with backwards planning, identifying at each grade level or content area what are the knowledge, skills, understandings that we want students to know, and those include typically some kind of soft skill or communication piece. So we want students to be able to, I'm going to make something up, the Pythagorean theorem, but we also want them to be able to explain why they're using that, which theorem they use when. So there's this idea of, and so from a teacher point of view, again, I always think about my first entry to the district. I was teaching all English 9, and the learning objective was that students will respond to literature. And which it was before standards, but what I remember is my husband, who is flippant, said, so if they read it and throw up, can you check that box? And I thought, no, that's not. But it was I was trying to really figure out, what does that mean? Respond how? Respond in writing? Respond to the content? Respond to the themes? Do I want them to analyze the writing? What does that look like? And it was completely up in the air. So it's this idea of, again, letting teachers be the professionals, but trying to articulate, I think, more clearly what does that look like, and for teachers, and I think teachers can articulate it, but it's not written down in any of our standards. It's not in our curriculum. If you ask teachers what's really important to learn in 5th grade, they can tell you, and some of that will be in a content, and some of that kind of isn't, I think. So that's where that comes from. So competency-based. There's a great book if anyone's interested. It's called K-12 Competency-Based Education. The author is a woman named Rose Colby, and she walks through how that looks. And so I might even have an extra copy if anyone is interested. I'm not sure. So thank you. Again, as we go through, I will ask as we get to sort of general comments and questions. So we have a meeting scheduled for January 10th. There will be no work happening in the curriculum. Well, there won't be no work happening. We will be working. You still have to come to work. But we won't be working on. There will be nothing new to report by January 10th. So I'm going to suggest that we do not meet on January 10th unless there is objection to that. And then by February we can bring back to you information from a survey that goes out, a summary of what's happening on those meetings and how the process is unfolding from that point on. So before we adjourn, we'll revisit whether or not we'll have that meeting. So the next item on our is just general comments or questions, and this is an opportunity for those of you who are new just to share questions that you have, comments or reflections on tonight, things you want us to perhaps make sure we bring back, to this committee in the future, and we'll just go from there. Ms. Addis, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I do have a question. I'm not sure if it's the right form, but we brought it up before with the standards-based report card. And I know last year, as a second grade teacher, I was asked for some input on that. Do we have a timeline on that at all, or? No. Okay. It's simple answer. So we this year have a new kindergarten report card. Kindergarten teachers got together last year. They piloted, and it's a skills-based report card. So we found out a few years ago that kindergarten teachers often ran 2 report cards: the district report card, and then they had a skills check sheet they would send home to parents. So here's which letters your kid knows, here's which colors they know, here's what they don't. Very concrete. We've had good feedback with that. As Ms. Addis said, first and second grade teachers had that conversation last year, and basically what's happening is there's between this committee,
the policy committee, teachers in their PLCs. There's a lot of discussion about what is a standards-based report card, because they look different all over the place. And do you start by identifying, here's what we want kids to learn in sort of a more competency way, or do you start by saying, let's change our grading system? So some of that is happening. FEA, which is Fairbanks Education Association, the teachers union, has a committee that they are meeting with the administration on different things, and they're sort of working through that. So I think people sort of have just taken a pause trying to get everybody on the same page. I think Michelle Dammel will be following up with folks on that later.
Okay. That's all I have.
All right. Mr. Vaughn?
I think we just had some really good conversations that I hope, I just appreciated the conversations and feedback today, and I'm excited about math coming up after you work out some of the kinks in the.
All right. Mr. Guy?
Just a lot of questions floating around my head, looking at how this could impact students in school and parents. A lot of questions that come up about the standards-based report cards. What happens when a kid hasn't mastered that material? Does that student then remain in that grade level, which isn't really even a part of standards-based, that whole process, that thought process? And then looking at, then the various ideas that we're talking about, a lot of soft skills. So are we going to then at one point tell parents, I'm sorry, your kid knows the content but doesn't have the soft skills to graduate from high school? That's an interesting conversation to have with a parent. So a lot of questions along those lines. I guess my last comment would be, I know we don't have a lot to cover in terms of January. I feel like we barely scratched the surface of those two questions. I would be absolutely happy to come back in January and just talk about those two questions and the huge rabbit hole that could lead down.
Okay.
I think there is a ton of different ways and approaches that we can take that. And just some of the comments that I heard tonight just got my brain rolling. Like, wow, that's cool. That could go in so many positive directions for kids. I still think that elementary needs to have a focus, and when we talk about personalized learning as a whole, of those fundamental skills, a lot of those soft skills. But when we get into the middle school and high school, when I think personalized learning, that's when I see students starting to drive more of that. I'm interested in this. What avenues do I have that you have that we can then get me to where I want to get? I think parents need to be involved in that process as well, because 14-year-olds don't always know what they want, nor do 22-year-olds, nor do 30-years-olds. So, and every kid's going to be different. So I love the idea of those pathways. I love the idea of providing those choices to kids and parents, but we have to have systems for that, and that takes a ton of planning. And as Mr. Peterson pointed out earlier, budgetary constraints have always got to be in the back of our mind as well, because as much as we would love to do everything for everyone and have a million little pathways, it's just not realistic. So.
Well, and if the committee would like to come back and continue this discussion, we definitely can do that. I want to make sure I'm not wasting your time, and so thinking about how to structure that. So going forward, I am totally willing, and I appreciate it.
No prep work for you. You just put up the same thing.
We just talked again.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sinclair.
I totally concur about what you had to say about the meeting. I think that's a great idea because we could sit here and talk forever about these things, and I think maybe we should.
Okay.
Other than that, I think we had a great discussion, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds for the students and teachers and everything.
All right, thank you.
I also agree. I think we only have 5 meetings in the school year coming, are left, and I'd hate to waste the January slot.
Okay.
Maybe we could come to a couple of conclusions on something.
Yeah.
Come to a conclusion on something. Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay, Ms. Radio.
I agree with everything Mr. Guy said. You're just a ditto. And then, no, I agree with having a meeting on the 10th as well and continuing to have this discussion. I think it's been a great discussion and I look forward to continuing to have it in a general sense, but also specifically as we deal with some of the more specific questions that will come up along the process. And then I wanted to throw in my bias hat here and reiterate what I said earlier about the library standards. The National School Library Standards, and I won't belabor it, I promise, have 6 shared foundations. They are inquire, include, collaborate, curate, explore, and engage. And I truly believe these are the 6 things we want in our soft skills. These are the things we are asking students to do every day in developing those process skills, and what they do with math and English and social studies in every subject area. They are inquiring, they are including, they are collaborating, they are doing these things. And I think that the district needs to seriously look at those standards and consider adopting them or a version like them in how it in that sense of having some sort of common set of process skills that teachers then during the curriculum revision process are adapted for that specific discipline, so that they're spread throughout as they are relevant to those specific areas. And I think that as we continue to have this discussion about the process and that question of soft skills and non-academic content, that it's going to be really important to answer that question about how it will be integrated when you're looking at a specific discipline and not the whole picture, and how you will answer those big picture questions like multiple pathways to graduation and personalization of that process.
All right, thank you. Mr. Peterson.
I think the soft skills question or issue is important. But there were a few comments that got me really thinking. And maybe it's just a reflection of the time I grew up in. But when we talk about identifying skill sets and sort of showing kids you should go that way, that to me is alarming, because and I wrote some of this stuff down, so I didn't want to forget this. By identifying a skill set that an individual has and saying, you should go do this, in some ways we are engineering our own society and saying you need to fill that role. And we're stifling, I wrote this down, it stifles the creativity that any individual would want to choose their own path. You talk about pathways to graduations and individualized pathways to achieve what we as our society has said you must have a diploma from high school to achieve the next steps. But if we start identifying people's skill sets, as Faye was saying, at 14, and saying, you should go this way.
No, just that you should have an idea.
You should have an idea, but does that in some way stifle their creativity and their options to do what they want to growing up? I mean, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. What kid knows even at 22 or 30 what they're going to do with their life? I mean, I went to law school when I was 28 because I went a totally other different direction. So I couldn't make money in that direction, so I went away. But
I took the ass down, told you to be a lawyer. Just saying.
So I think it's a fine line that you have to walk between identifying a child's skills and saying that might be a good choice for you, yet still allowing them to explore. Because they may not want to be a mechanical engineer.
But it's not a lockstep.
Right, no, I know it's not, but we have to be careful that doesn't
we
become
don't do
that.
it, yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
We talked about that on our side as, you know, they gotta be able to change their mind at some point.
Right, right, and so we don't want to. And again, this is for a much larger discussion other than my personal comment. But you don't want to create a process for shepherding students through that lock them into getting their diploma, despite the pathway they choose, because the end result is get them that diploma and not allow them to explore as much as they can to become what they want to be and achieve the result that we think they need to have. Okay, enough said. I'm happy to come back in January too.
And anything else, Mr. Peterson? I know you always say good things and people hop in and have a conversation. I want to make sure you have a chance to.
No, and it's just that's the one point I wanted to make was I was just the comments that led me to this thought came from several people that, you know, let's have them take the test and identify their skill sets. You know, I grew up, you know, in the 70s, and the big thing there was, you know, the East Germans saying, you're a tall person, you're going to go to that sport and do this for our country, and you know, the Soviet system, because they were the big enemy. And you know, we would always think as a society, we don't want to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, you know, identifying somebody's skill set at 14 and saying, let's go that way with this, even if it's a gentle push, smacks a little bit of, you're tall, you're going to play basketball for your country. So.
And I think another part to consider is the interest side of that as well.
Right.
So knowing that you're interested in that and your skill set is high, I think when you see both of those things, you're going to have that more, maybe not even a push, but just a conversation where you're saying, wow, you're really good at that and you're interested, might be worth looking into.
Correct.
Counselors, the school counselors a few years ago had a conversation about how do you help create a system where kids are looking at options, because you want kids to come through with all of the options, because so many of us, when we didn't know where we were going to end up, so we want to make sure you're doing things that keep your options open. But how do you also at the same time give them some options to choose from, so that they don't exit high school not having any idea where to go? So that balance of keep your options open and explore, but then also have some kind of idea of how you're going to eventually not live in your parents' basement, right? So that that balance, and that's a hard balance, I think.
Well, I think too, a lot of 14-year-olds, myself included, I knew I wanted to be a scientist. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I had that interest. I think a lot of, like, my grandson has no clue what he wants to do except be a football player. Well, if he makes 5'10", 5'11", he'll still play high school football. But out there, past that, he's not looking there. And I kind of think, if you know that there's an out there at a young age, you don't have to go through, you can do your academics, you can try for the scholarship, you can do this, you can do that, but know that there is an out there.
Yeah.
Where he at 14 doesn't know there's an out there yet.
Right.
I think part of that too is preparation for students who do have that idea. Like, I took the LSAT in 9th or 10th grade, and it gave me a lot of different things. It gave me careers to think about that I had never been exposed to before, and so it allowed me to think about that in a new way. And then when I thought, I might want to go to science, clearly did not end up doing that. But thinking about what do I need to do to become a scientist? I need to go to a 4-year. I need to get a 4-year degree. What sort of schools? What requirements are they looking for? Well, I needed to take more math than I was going to take otherwise. Thinking about that future, because you don't want to get to your senior year and be like, oh, I need 3 more math classes. Wish I had done that earlier. There are questions like things like that to think about. It's never limiting those choices that students are making, but allowing them to think forward instead of just in the now.
And that's a real challenge too, because like Mr. Peterson said, it's easy to fall into that.
It is.
Yeah. Mr. Kincaid.
Alright, so I was a big fan of personalized learning personally, and I always thought it's probably much better for the student, but I couldn't understand how the teacher would keep up with that many levels of academics in one class. So, and the same thing I always say, I write it down and say, how does it look, what does personalized learning look like? What does it look like in the 12th grade? So if you get a personalized learning program all the way through, then your degree program has to be pretty much personalized. So your requirements don't become requirements, they become measurements. This is where you are in the 12th grade. This is where you are, this is where you see, right, I need these skills, I'm bad in these skills, I need more help in these skills. But I don't know, like you said, leaving someone behind, you're not going to redo those skills. So it's kind of hard to say you need these classes to graduate, but at what level? So I don't know, so it gets to be pretty difficult for you teaching that. So I was like, oh, I want to be teaching now. It's like a difficult task trying to measure that out. So where did I rate this student at, as opposed to what the requirements are? Did he actually get the objective? Did he meet the objective? I don't know if he did or he didn't. What level did he meet it? Did he meet it enough to say, okay, you passed it? I don't know. So other than that, you just say, this is where you are on your scale. Next grade. Sooner or later, you're on your own anyway. Wherever you are in the measurement scale, you're out there. So.
Thank you. So I just have a couple of things. One is just thank you all for participating. I will schedule January meeting, and we will plan on being here. And those of you who are interested and can make it, please feel free to come. Just one thought as we were talking about options is I realized one of the things I think I'm hopeful, and I appreciate this conversation, is that as I said earlier, I think as teachers, at least speaking for myself, I wasn't aware of all of the options. I knew what was an option as I came into the profession and when I graduated from high school, but then I lived in high school for 20 years and I didn't really know until my own kids started to realize. And even then, I realized I was probably giving them some bad advice about what, go to college, figure it all out until you get the paycheck. And I'm like, what was I thinking, right? So that idea of, and then also I think we have a separation oftentimes in our curriculum and in our high schools about it. Are you going to college or a career? And the reality is that college isn't a career, right? At the end of college, we want people to get jobs. So that idea of how do we talk about those things in that kind of way? So that I appreciate, I think, this outside of education perspective as we do this, because I think that's going to really help us build a richer curriculum. So and it's going to be different for teachers that come and participate in the curriculum revision. That's going to be a different process. And so if you have ideas about how to make that happen. The other is I just want to ask again is there's not an outcome. So a lot of times I ask questions or I'll say things like, do we need, I really, I don't know the answers. So please know that, again, I appreciate your input on the process. I sort of have this draft plan for where we're going, but it's going to sort of build itself as it goes. So, I appreciate it there. And, again, there's not a predetermined outcome for how all of this will look or what our graduate might look like or how we go about that. So I appreciate the process because I think that's, my hope is just for a more responsive process as we go. The last thing I just wanted to share with you, and it was funny, I could have paid Deborah. So just to share, it doesn't really have a committee. Usually when our school board considers resolutions, those oftentimes come from a committee, and then they go to the school board for consideration. And we are bringing forth from our department a resolution asking the school board will either pass it or not pass it, but asking for our district to encourage the state to adopt the new library standards and to look at adopting those for inclusion in our district as well. So it's curriculum in that it's not currently curriculum because we don't have an adopted library program per se, but that is something that we are going to be bringing forward, and so that will be on the school board agenda, probably with timelines. I'm guessing it'll show up in January or February, and I can share that final process when it comes through. But that is something that we are trying to look at, and as more and more of digital literacy and how do you interact with your world and how do you interact with social media and how do you interact with resources. I mean, there's so many different pieces. So that will be coming forward, and you know, again, it's not really our purview is curriculum revision and the curriculum revision processes, so it doesn't really fit, but I did want to share that with you guys as well. So that being said, our agenda is, we are now to item number F. We do have a meeting scheduled on January 10th, and Jennifer will send out reminders. If you have suggestions for that agenda, I come to a conclusion on something was what I wrote down as our task for that day. So how to do that, you know, I always, you know, I appreciate your indulgence. I told Jennifer that I don't think all of the committees have sort of group work discussions, and I sometimes feel like but I think that I'm trying to create some ways to have that, because I think that was really can shape our process, so I appreciate your indulgence with that. And
move to adjourn. Is that what you're waiting for?
Move to adjourn. Is there a second? Any
second.
objections? Thank you guys. Everybody drive safely going home, and thank you for participation.